right, well, thank you so much for coming out this evening. For those of you unfamiliar with who I am, my name is Lily Yee, and I have the honor of teaching history through art and story here at the St. Constantine School. Since our first year in operation as a pre-K through 12 institution, I've had the honor and privilege of teaching history to first and second grade students. After sharing time with these young students and seeing their incredible capabilities for learning, relationship, exploration, and creativity, it's been made quite clear to me, as I hope you will see too, that these young ones, that bringing these young ones into our world's living history is no small mantle to bear, and it's quite the treat. So tonight I'm here to talk with you about why we teach history through art, and with the help of you, my lovely audience, I will show you how it works. At the St. Constantine School, we seek to enliven the whole child, head, heart, and hands. These parts are engaged by admiring and recreating great works of art, hearing poetry and song, exploring geography, and learning the living stories of people from the past, along with all their virtues, mistakes, challenges, and triumphs. I'm regularly asked about what kind of food people ate, where they lived, what the weather in their country was like, what they wore, what they did for fun, but most of all, I hear the question, why? In the grammar stage, children desire to understand the world around them, and history provides a foundation by which to answer those questions. Charlotte Mason wrote in her book on school education that the main part of a child's education should be concerned with the great human relationships, relationships of love and service, authority and obedience, of reverence and pity and neighborly kindness, relationships to kin and to friend, to neighbor, to cause and country and kind, of past and present. History is just this. While our students learn about the great and terrible kings, church fathers condemning heresy, explorers setting off to new worlds, soldiers fighting for the good, great scientists and playwrights seeking truth, and saints living for the cause of Christ and his church, they begin to see the common thread of humanity and the workings of the world. Nothing so strikes the student of history as the persistent way in which ideas recur. There are some challenges that accompany teaching real history rather than just social studies in elementary school. Toward the beginning of the year, I'm asked time and time again about figures like Charles Martel, who was born nearly 1,300 years ago. Wait, is this person still alive? Number sense in the hundreds and thousands place can be a little tricky still in first grade. We're still learning that. So we also have, the really fun experience of seeing students feel this history come to life, even out on the playground. So there have been several sword fights that I've had to intervene in and things like that, just because they feel the stories so heavily. So really, though, some of the material encountered throughout history can be quite tough and very graphic sometimes, especially when it comes to things like the plague, the Great Irish Famine, and the causes of wars and battles. Those are really heavy things to bear and heavy things to think about. However, these topics have sparked conversation amongst my students about how they might rule differently than, say, King John, how to be a good king or queen, how they would help others in need who were sick or starving, and how they admired someone in a story who did a brave thing, even in the face of danger. Stories speak not only to the mind, but to the heart, leaving lasting connections. We are not teaching students these stories and essential human truths to hold on to for a single year, but to internalize for years to come. Our students complete the basic cycle of history, so ancient, medieval, and then modern, 3 times over before beginning the rhetoric stage or high school. I would love to see Mrs. Cogburn's pre-K4 students reach 9th grade, I'll be super old then, while reading Plato's Republic. I would love to see them have a basic understanding of the social context in which that text was written, just because of all of the history they've learned starting back in pre-K. Beyond that, it would be such a sweet thing to see students remember Saint Scholastica and Saint Benedict and reach out to help someone who was suffering because of the stories they've been learning in the class. This education is not only for the sake of knowledge, but of wisdom and habit as well. It should be an active education. Children are not meant to be filled with information like buckets with sand, but like Charlotte Mason says, we demand of education that it should make for the evolution of an individual. It should have for its sole aim the making the very most of that person, intellectually, morally, physically. We do not desire any dead accretions of mere knowledge or externals of mere accomplishment. A good education shall become part and parcel of the person. acquisition of mere learning is not necessarily education at all. That being said, I'm not sure why I've yet adequately answered the question, why do we use art as the vehicle for history? Let me start with a story. One of my students, who I've taught now for about 2 years, coming up on 2 years, has a fine motor development issue that makes writing really frustrating for him. It often causes him just to shut down because it feels so insurmountable. However, when doing recreations of art, with great works of art, the pressure to do perfectly is less paralyzing. I ask my students to try their best, obviously, but if they're never going to be penalized for falsely contouring the face or hand of a king. So during this week, we were all learning about the Magna Carta and King John of England. Rather than simply recreating the illuminated page that was sitting before him, my student, let's call him Alfred, proceeded to draw each element of the story onto the page. John pleading forgiveness from the archbishop, his barons visiting him to talk about their issues with him, and the Magna Carta being sealed. He was telling me a story through his art, and he was using his self-expression as well. So hopefully each time Alfred sees the Magna Carta or the illumination we use as our template or styles like that one, or an image of King John, he'll remember the whole story along with it, as well as all the moral values that he learned through that. One of them being not like to be King John. He's famously known to be a big baby. So similarly, another one of my students, while learning about Galileo's life, you guys can see those recreations up here behind me, used his painting to process the information given him during our lesson. I think it is this one right down here. You can see that one. So he wrote several dates and letters in addition to the portrait of Galileo there, and you can tell that his mind was running wild with all the information that he was given. And so he used his painting to process what he had been learning, because that physical act of writing is something that really helps internalize information. So he used this to synthesize everything that we've been learning about this week. So when we do paintings like this, it's a 2-day process. We first work on getting the crayon lines down, and then we'll go like the following day and do the painting part itself. So art not only helps to connect the living stories with faces and colors and specific styles or tones of art, but it allows the children to it allows them to express their ideas, feelings, and show the perspective about what they've learned that week. So they're learning the skill of storytelling through history paintings. So history paintings are actually a type of art that was birthed in 17th century of France, primarily taught in art academies. So it's actually it's a little tricky. It's contested about whether it's true, beautiful art. I think it is, but there was a lot of heat when the art academies got started because it started to create just a mass of artists and there was nowhere for their art to go. So works like Charles de Steuben's Battle de Poitiers was created nearly 1,000 years after the event's occurrence. So the Battle of Tours happened in 732. This was made 1,000 years after that. This painting that depicted what went on. So though it may give us a grand-mannered view of what happened, grand mannerism is a focus on a specific event, but it makes it pretty ideal. It focuses on really beautiful parts of it and not necessarily like the nitty-gritty of what actually happened during an event. It gives physical faces and bodies to these people and characters that they're learning about in the stories, allowing students to cement that in their mind. They're exposed early to beauty through art, and they're taught as well to create with their own hands, which is a gift given to everyone by God. So hopefully, if we start to develop this early, it won't be squandered. Some studies show that drawing the larger parts of development stops at about age 12. So if you're not cultivating that skill up to about age 12, you might be 75 years old, an engineer, and you're drawing a self-portrait that looks like you did when you were 12. Yeah, so it's not impossible to sort of regain those skills, but it takes a lot of work. So hopefully we can get them started on that now. Drawing, painting, and sculpting, even difficult works of art, really challenging ones for them, is increasingly important in the age of drag-and-drop e-puzzles and click-to-fill coloring books on iPads. Even things like skills like cutting paper aren't being taught as frequently because kids are playing with paper dolls on iPads. And so those are skills that we're working on in our art through history class. So Charlotte Mason asserts that elemental relationship which every child should be taught in a true education is that of power over material. Every child makes sandcastles, mud pies, paper boats. He or she should go down to work in clay, wood, brass, iron, leather, dress stuffs, food stuffs, and furnishing stuffs. He should be able to make with his hands and take delight in making. So that's what we're hoping to do through the history and art class. So we are working on cementing those historical ideas through the physical practice of art, whether that's crafting. We learned about the Washington fire that the British started, or the White House fire that the British started during the Revolutionary War. And we actually did a handicraft of it. We did like little peg people and cut lots of paper to make a White House and worked on tearing tissue paper so we could make it look like jumping flames and things like that. I should have sent it with a note home to say that it was not political in any way, purely historical. So right now, actually, I've been in the process of developing a full curriculum for this. Mrs. Gilbert, when she was creating the curriculum for the school and choosing things that would be good in the classroom, really didn't find anything that she found totally satisfactory for first and second grade. And so she's given me the really wonderful and terrifying task of researching and creating a curriculum for our first and second graders. And so over the course of the next few years, it'll take a while to develop. I'm going to be working on making illustrated timeline cards with images of art that go with whichever event we're learning about. I'll be studying exactly which events should be included in this and the way that we should talk about them. I'll be writing books. I've actually got some that are already finished that you would be welcome to take a look at. So illustrated books, ones that parents and teachers can read, and then ones that are actually on the child's reading level as well. So as well as different maps and other just handy things that they can touch and feel and use as they're learning about history. So hopefully you'll see a finished curriculum here in a few years. So thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for coming into this conversation with me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have before we get started on our art. Thanks. Yes?
So is there a difference between how the kids respond to, I guess, a painting of like an event in history versus a painting of a figure in history?
Yes, actually. So do you mean just like general response from students?
Or how they perceive it, or how it's taught?
Yeah, so the initial scare with that is that there's so many people in it, because usually there are like hundreds of people depicted in the picture, and the figures can be pretty hard for them. And so a lot of the time what we'll do when I'm teaching and leading that particular drawing is we'll focus in on one section of it, so it's not so overwhelming. But I do see them connect more with the event pictures more so than the portrait pictures, because they can narrate what's going on in the picture using what they've learned from our story that week. And so it actually gives them like the framework to be able to say, oh, well, I remember this happened in the story, and then this happened, and then these guys came over here and did this. And so it actually, it works really well to kick that off and have them start self-narrating those events that we've been learning about. So, yeah. Awesome. Yes? Yes. So it does vary. I do have it scheduled. Each week is a new thing. But, some topics are a lot heavier than others. So the Civil War is what we're talking about in second grade this week. And so obviously there's a ton of material to be covered and lots of people to meet and lots of places to see. And so we'll likely end up spending more like a week and a half to 2 weeks on that, especially given the fact that we have Western Good Friday off next week. So typically we'll spend about a week. So we'll start... I do my best when I can each week to have a story written, whether that's illustrated or not, so that the students are getting sort of like the whole big picture, and then we can hone in on certain details that they want to learn about. So I'll sit down and read them a story, and then I'll give them time to ask questions, and they usually have a lot. So what I'll do prior to that is I fire hose myself with information because they could ask anything. Truly, there were a couple days that I got caught and I was like, I don't know the answer to that question. Like, who was his grandmother, or, you know, like, how did he die? I'm like, I don't know. That's a great question. And so they truly have spurred me on to make sure that I am studied up well enough to answer all the questions they have, and really to synthesize that information and make it feel like one big whole story that they can grasp. And so we'll do the story, and then sometimes we'll start on a piece of art if we have enough time. So just with the logistics of the scheduling, second grade I have them for a lot longer period of time, and first grade it's a little bit shorter because they have a long recess prior to getting to me. And so oftentimes we'll be able to get through a lot more art with our second graders than with first grade. So yeah, we'll spend at least one whole class period, usually more like 1.5, on any given piece of art. Just because I like to take them slowly through it. I have lots of questions like, what can I do for his nose? I don't know how to draw that nose. And so I'll do my best to, do my best to like explain as best I can so that everyone's on the same page, because we do have several children, like students with some fine motor development issues, and so I want to make sure that they're feeling caught up with that as well. So, yeah. Yes?
Do you feel like the students get more increasingly confident or proud of their work, or is there general like satisfaction with the work that they produce?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So initially they were a little apprehensive because the pictures that they're seeing and the art that they're seeing is their masterworks, right? So we're shooting real high. So as the time has gone on, second grade, I almost never actually have to lead a drawing for them. They almost never want my guided help because they feel so confident that they can just do it on their own. And it's actually been really great because that allows their personal style to come out, and to see them sort of tackle a big picture, especially like an event picture, is so interesting. Like Lucas will focus in on like one tiny corner, and he'll just work on just colors. He doesn't even outline. So he'll work on his colors. And then Caleb, he'll do his he'll focus on like whatever's in the forefront, and then we'll sort of work out from there and add more details as he's thinking. Some kids work like left to right. Usually I'll start, if I'm doing a figure, I'll start head and go down. So some of them have adopted that as well, but it's so interesting. Like Giselle, she has learned to draw in the past, like using, I guess, like anime and things like that, and so that actually comes through in her art. So like we did a picture of George Washington, and he was like real cutesy and had big ol' eyes and like a twinkle in his eye, but like, you know, I could look at it and say, this is Giselle's work. Like, she's really proud of this. So it's been really great to see them feel more and more confident. Even I've seen such huge improvements in the first grade, who I got for the first year this year, just in as far as like feeling proud of their finished product. Like, they cannot wait to take it home, because we send out papers every 2 weeks, and so they'll say, oh, but can I take this home today? I really want to show my mom. And I'm like, sorry, but they're so proud of it, and it's been really encouraging to see them just become more confident in the classroom, because that actually translates into their ability to answer questions about the story and talk about the characters and the figures a lot better. So, yeah. All right. You guys want to get started?
Can you show us the
Oh, yes. Yeah. So these are actually a couple of the books. These are some first grade ones that I worked on this year. So these are a little bit more final than some of the other ones that I've had in the past. So we worked on this one about Francis of Assisi. So all of the pictures are colored, I hope. Yes, they are. And I actually did write all of the words for this one. So I did all the research and the writing. And so we'll read this whole book together. He's in prison. You tell he's ill. Yeah, and so we'll just keep going. They love these. They'll actually request that I read them every day when they're all done. And so there's that one. And then this Magna Carta one, we just did, I think, right before we went on spring break. So these are illustrated a little bit differently. I got some illustrating markers so I can ink them. And so this actually was written, the text in this one is by Eva March Tappan. The text is written in 1914. So it's all public domain now. But yeah, so there we go. All his barons. King John having the Magna Carta text read to him, all his rights. He's very grumbly. They couldn't see his face. And then there's an illustration of the Magna Carta. We actually did something really fun this week. I demonstrated what a wax seal was for them. They thought I was going to set the building on fire. But they were thrilled. They all got to take a little wax seal home, but because they had no idea what a seal was. They were like, well, what is that? It's like a stamp? I'm like, that's different. So, yeah, so hopefully we'll have full sets of these for each grade by the time I get done with them in a few years. Yes, yeah.
So, I guess kind of what Nicola was saying, but do you kind of attach or connect the dots for them? So we're viewing like where you went, where you're going, or something.
Yes.
Is that kind of a frequent thing you do?
Yes, absolutely. So, because when you, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her name real fast. Give me one moment. Oh, yeah. Susan Wise Bauer. She does the story of the world for Classical Conversations. I love her. She starts the story all the way back and goes all the way through. So she actually sticks with one location for like a pretty good amount of time. And so I move around a little bit more. And so I try to do my best to connect the dots, like say all my lesson plans are gone now. Yeah, I will. That way they know that these aren't just totally disjointed things in the world. So even like the Napoleonic Wars and the American Revolution and the French Revolution, like we'll connect all those dots to say, okay, at the time of the American Revolution, here were all these other things going on that we've talked about already. So that they know that those things aren't like one-off occurrences and then nothing else happens in France until after American history, you know? So, yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. What do you guys think?
You have a timeline in the back of your room too, right?
I do. Yeah, so that's also still in progress. Would you mind going to grab, I have some timeline cards in my desk drawer. Sure. I would love to, you're sitting at my desk in the upper right-hand corner. But yeah, so last year we kept personal timelines, and we haven't kept up with that as much this year because they wanted to focus in more on art. And so the cool thing about having a class as small as I do, we cap at 15, is that we really get to do some sort of self-guided stuff. So I get to individualize the lessons where needed. So last year, even we had some really hard stuff going on at the end of the year, so I figured maybe the plague is not the greatest thing to talk about. We don't need to focus more on death at this point in the year. So it's been really great to be able to sort of mold and fix that as I need to and as the students need. So these are some of the timeline cards that we're going to be using once we have a full set. So we have illustrated timeline cards, so like the Battle of Tours. This is based on Charles de Steuben's Battle de Poitiers of my own creation. So we learned about Queen Elizabeth I. So we have illustrated timeline cards for all these guys. Oh yeah, first grade learned about the Council of Chalcedon. Learned that Jesus is fully God and fully man. We've got Justinian and Theodora. And then we did the Age of Exploration. We've got Ferdinand Magellan and Jacques Cartier. Ivan the Terrible and Saint Benedict. And then we've got Martin Luther. And then this one is to note the fall of the Western Roman Empire. So we've got Romulus Augustus and Emperor Constantine over here. And then the rest of these are just to break down, like we've got one for the Middle Ages, and then one for our modern world, so they know which timeline belongs to who. And then we've got some more little markers for breaking up that timeline a little bit more. Yeah, so seeking for full sets of those by the end of the summer. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Yes.
Interesting to see as these kids grow up and then move on to history and other classes. Like,
Yes.
how will they take this forward? Maybe their history teachers in the future classes, they'll be drawing everything. Like it'll be natural. As they listen to lectures, they'll be drawing in the margins of.
Right, right. And hopefully they'll already have such a good background for what they'll be learning about. Because I do try to consult Story of the World where I can, as well as we've got the Classical Conversations timeline cards as well. I feel like those cut the information down too much and it's more factual. Like it's sort of dry. And so they tend to connect with it less when you just go, this is what happened, the end, and don't talk about sort of the finer points of life in that time period, or even some of the interpersonal conflict. We talked about the tutor family in second grade toward the beginning of the year, and they loved it. They wanted to know who was married to who and who all was mad at each other, and they loved figuring, they loved the personhood aspect of it and just getting to know all the social parts of it as well. So. I'm going to draw sort of a squared oval for his head. If you see mine, you can take about as much space as I did. It's really cool to see and watch them get spatial reasoning down a little bit more.
Yeah. Math at work.
Okay.
My guy looks like a Lego.
I'm actually going to take my orange block crayon after I do that, and I'm going to lightly shade in the top half.
I don't even hear.
Eraser.
That's another thing about my classroom. Oftentimes we will not use pencils to outline the drawing first. So it teaches them to be confident in their first swift art motions, and causes them to slow down and be a little bit more thoughtful about where they're placing lines and how big they're making things and how hard they're pressing. So, okay, next.
Shade that whole,
Just the
that
top
whole guy.
half. Yeah. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to give him an ear. If you notice on his head, it's not in the middle of his head on the side. It's pretty low.
It's an impressionist
Yes.
baby.
That's
I
right.
like it.
So you're going to give him a little ear over here. I always feel like Bob Ross when I do this part. Just a little ear. And then I'm going to give him a nose as well. I'm going to give him a nose as well. So notice that his nose is a little bit smaller at the top and it gets bigger at the bottom. So if you're feeling worried about your nose, you can always do an L. And then just give him a little side like that. So I will do mine. Start up higher with the nose than you think you should, because it's going to meet up his eyebrows. So look at about where his eyebrows are. He still has a lot of forehead left.
You going brown for the shots?
I'm staying orange.
Or you still orange?
Yeah, I'm still orange.
Colorblind. Not actually.
If you want to give him a little frowny eyebrow, put some lines at the top of his nose, you're welcome to do that as well. Next, I'm going to take my bright stick crayon. I'm going to color in his cheeks a little bit. That's more his cheeks. His face is wearing Oh, I switched before I should have. My apologies.
Wait, what were you doing?
I gave him some little rosy cheeks with my red stick crayon. I just lightly colored in. They're not perfect circles, so. We're going to do eyes next with our orange stick crayon. So a lot of the time I'll have students that just want to do one of these. But if you're feeling confident, try to do an almond shape like this. And don't forget to leave space for his eyelids, because he has a very prominent upper and lower lid. I'm going to do mine. If your eyes aren't perfectly symmetrical, that's okay. No one in your lives are either.
Where did you study?
I actually studied at Houston Baptist University, but I do not have an art degree. I'm actually thinking about going back to either Rice or University of Houston and doing an art education, or not art education, I'm sorry, art history degree.
Okay.
So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to draw some pupils. I'm going to go lightly in black and then add some blue for his irises. I don't know if you can tell, but he does have blue eyes. Be sure to note where he's looking. He's not looking straight ahead.
Oh.
Negative is not polite to laugh at.
I just full on point and laughed at his. I'm such a bad second Hold on. Teachers to my left are disrupting me. Teachers make the worst students. It's a well-known fact.
Wait, how did you do that?
Is blue really? Are they?
They're very lightly blue. They're like a bluish gray.
Yeah.
So I just mixed the black and the blue.
You are wrong.
So I'm actually going to get out my yellow stick crayon and my black stick crayon for his beard and hair. Let's start with his mustache. Mustaches are one of my favorite things to draw on portraits. They all have so much character. We just did a portrait of Genghis Khan, or we're in the middle of it, and he's got this real long beard and like a little mustache and a goatee. So you're going to go, I always start with the top.
Does it come right out of his nose?
It does, actually. And it's okay if it's a little long because we're going to give him a beard anyway, so. Leave him a little bit of room for his lip. It's a very thin one. So I'm going to start with my black first. I'm going to go over with some yellow on top. Quiet words. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to give him this very nice long beard. So notice over here, over here, it's pretty straight, and then it's going to taper down into his mustache. And it's a pretty square beard. It's a rectangular beard on the bottom. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but it doesn't actually cover his whole chin. It actually comes in like a little triangle down here, maybe close to his chin. Go over that with more yellow. And then before we draw his lips, I'm going to go ahead and lightly color in the rest of the face that I didn't cover with orange. You guys are ready for lips. It's almost a little straight line, you can barely see. And it tucks right up underneath his mustache. His eyebrows will help him to look more stoic. We talk a lot about facial expression and why facial expression is the way that it is in pictures, especially when it comes to like royal family paintings or saints even. They used to call them angry. Why does St. Constantine look angry? And we talked about sort of the difference between like a thoughtful look of prayer and to have a sort of stoic look on your face to be very distinguished. We also talked about the process of like painting portraits and talking about how long you have to sit for them. So you're not going to be like throughout the whole time because it takes a really long time. So we do a little bit of that as well. So I'm I give them some eyebrows. They're not shaped the same, and they're pretty long. So they almost look like eyelashes. Actually, let me get a little bit of a mustache. Yellow as well. Sort of acts as the highlight. You can see the yellow is like the sun shining on his eyebrows. And then he has some very airy hair up here. I'm actually going to take this opportunity with my hair here to make his head a little bit taller than I originally made it. So I'm going to go over his ear, and some long sideburns. Go into his beard. For the area effect on the top of his head, I recommend scrumbling, which is different than scribbling. It's a purposely shaped scribble, I mean, but it's sort of like you make little figure eights and then occasionally change up which direction they go. But if you do that really lightly, it makes an airy hair on top of his head. These are doing really well.
All we're going for is better than second graders.
They're pretty great artists.
Yeah.
So. Okay. To challenge you guys a little bit, we normally don't do a whole bunch of shadowing, or like shadows or anything, except if we're doing black and white portraits, we will do shadows then. So I would take your brown block crayon and use the short end right here, that little corner. There. To do some shadows on the side of his face. He doesn't have noticeable eyelashes.
I thought that was weird.
Yeah. Wait, how do you use this little side for the shadowing? Use that corner of the
The
crayon.
brown one?
Yeah.
Which,
This. This one. You guys might be better artists than
What do
I
you
am.
call this material we're using?
These are beeswax crayons. These are special, not Montessori, they're Waldorf crayons. Michael Antuzzi, our resident artist, is he's Waldorf trained. So he's got all kinds of good materials. Put some brown in his ear too.
Yeah.
I'm also
So he
going to
gives it a
give
sword
him, using this little corner here, or you can use your brown stick crayon. I'm going to give him some of these smile lines right here.
where'd you get the small one from?
Right here. They're just above where his mustache is.
Bring out the stick.
This is great. Will. Look at Will over
I
here.
told you, hey, I already put the beat down first, so I want to
I didn't tell the totally cheating.
You're going to come in and guest art class. You're going to guest teach.
Well,
Oh, man.
Sorry.
All right. So when you guys are ready, I'm going to start on the collar. So, I just want to, like, with your black stick crayon, we're going to do like a little triangle all around here. And have it come out on the other side of his beard. I'll wait to do the folded back part. I'm feeling not confident right here. So from this top, the top right-hand corner, we're going to draw a little curve down like that, make it look like a little candy cane. And then you're going to connect it to the back to give him that folded collar.
It's the little curvy part on the back of it, right?
You stop, yeah. Start at the upper left hand, or the upper right hand corner, and just bring it down like this is going to turn into a candy cane. And then you connect it right there. I can't tell if you're kidding or not.
I'm not. This is magic.
So from where you folded his collar there, you're going to bring out his shoulder. And then same on the other side. The really cool thing about most of these portraits is that a lot of this is, you don't have to worry about the shape of the arms too much. I'm going to add it for my own reference so I know where to put the hand. But we're going to just color it all in after this anyway. I'm going to start, it helps me to put the sleeves. So you guys look like his little white sleeves here. It's going to help me understand where I should put his hand. And we can all suffer over hands together. If you guys need some points of reference, we have a lot of different hands up here. There's some little flower hands over there. Some of us skipped them all together, and that's fine too. You just cut them out of the picture, and they're not there. We're going to draw a floating telescope up here. Okay, so I'm going to take my orange stick frame. Actually, no, I'm going to take stick and block. To start the palm of his hand, I'm going to do, use this side right here.
What color?
Orange.
Wait, what do you mean the palm? You can't see the palm.
Or the top of the hand.
Oh. I was like, what is that called? Is it
I actually don't know. The roof of the hand?
That's good.
hand roof?
I understand that.
I'm just gonna, mine, this hand cuts off sort of the bottom of the paper, so I'm not gonna bring it all the way down. Because I'm missing his pinky. Well, let's do like a rectangle where you can. Okay, next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna do some fingers. They're not sticking straight out, they're also not laying on top of each other. So I'm actually gonna start with the pinky, because it's not covered up by any other fingers. I'm actually going to do a hand up here because you cannot see the hands on my drawing. If it helps, notice the joints in the finger and notice how the finger tapers as it goes down. So you don't just have like little lock hands. I love drawing art like this because it actually really helps them to observe the art better because they really do have to focus on each single part as they're working. All right. You guys, we can do this.
Oh,
you don't have to worry.
My hand
You don't have to
blew my
worry.
whole picture.
Are you doing an art piece in orange?
Yeah, we are doing it on our piece of orange.
Right. It's the hand, right? The hand is the downfall.
hardest part.
It's the downfall. downfall.
You know, if you want to, I'm not going to show you. All those fingers are curved down, so you can just sort of bring them over. Oh, try not to put something there. Just make sure they're distinct enough.
Yeah, and 2 fingers.
And then you can just draw his ring on, because that is the focal point of his hand anyway. So I'm going to use my black stick crayon. Give him a finger, or a ring.
So hard.
Hands are so hard.
No, it's just got, these are the 2 fingers, and then there's a ring, but the other one's not even in there. It's out of frame.
I like it, I like it.
Yeah.
Mine's hurting here. I put 6 fingers on the
Is that an extra one for inventing? It's fine.
Terrible.
Okay.
The 6 fingers.
So, this other hand is even harder because it's at a different angle, and so you're getting like some interesting dimensions. It all looks shorter.
He's so weird.
I'm gonna show you guys a tricky trick on this one. I'm gonna just color in the whole, or the whole area of the hand with the orange block crayon on the side of it. And then we're gonna just draw the lines between where the fingers would be. So you might have to draw a little thumb coming off the edge because he's holding something. Yeah, you can just do it like that. It's a little teeny way to do it. Hey, that's not bad. Good.
It's like a hand that comes out of a bowl of candy at Halloween.
Yeah.
It's not human.
That's funny.
Not what it is. Okay. So, next we're going to use this telescope. So I'm going to use my brown, yellow, and black stick crayons for that part. Again, to make sure I know how much space I need, I'm going to start from the hand and work out to the glass of the telescope. So, I'm going to draw 2 lines here. I'm going to put a little smiley face. Actually, I'm going to jump a little bit and go all the way to the end with my yellow, and we're going to make some round there too. Yellow too. You're going to do a shape on the very end that looks like you can either draw. You can draw it one of 2 ways. You can draw that part first, and then draw this side. Or you can get real confident with it. And connect that way.
Is that the brown crayon you're using now for the telescope?
For the telescope, the part closest to the hand is the brown one, and then the yellow is at the very end, but we're going to mix some brown in.
Okay. Does it look like the telescope is, it looks like the telescope is pointing a little at us, even, in the...
So we will color the inside of the circle with a different way to show that. So.
You also just be holding a flashlight, why not? Same thing.
So he's holding a flashlight.
It's illuminating truth, regardless. Good work.
I was trying to get this
No, we got a dictator right where I'm going.
as shading goes, pressure does make a difference in these crayons. You can also use space to like show shading. So closer together would be darker colors, and more shadow, and then the more spread out they are, the lighter it looks. I think we're going to try to get into some crosshatch in the second grade here in a couple weeks. So we'll see. All right, and then Megan noted that this looks like it's almost facing out of this. If you want to show that inner part, like the back of it, what you're going to do is you're just going to draw some line down the direction of coloring, especially with crayons and markers and coloring pencils, really all of it. It super matters. So when you can, try to color in the same direction or color in a way that shows the shape of something. So instead of like, if I was coloring a shirt, I don't want to start like this, coloring, and then color over it like that. I'm going to try to keep it going one way, or have it show the curvature of bend or fold cloth or like an arm.
We should post these and let the second grade versus second graders look at them.
That would be awesome. All right, so we're getting to the easy part. The last thing that we are going to do before we color in his clothing in the background is add his chin. So. Because Galileo is in fact the focal point of this painting and not the chair, I'm going to do the first thing right around, and then I'm going to go over it with black to shade it out a little bit. So it's less noticeable when we do the last part.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Your chair looks like the chair.
Sure it does.
The formal morning.
Oh, I know what
We have 3 classroom rules, guys. What are
Where
your 3
you wanna
rules?
pull
Oh, my
them
3
are.
classroom rules are be kind, be respectful, and be helpful. So helpful to criticize others, not.
Oh, I was talking about myself.
Oh. Being kind also includes yourself. You have to be kind to yourself. All right, so for the last and final step.
Sorry.
We are gonna just, you're gonna use, I use the short end, so I have a little bit more control over how much black I put in. But I'm gonna really heavily black out his outfit the best of my ability.
Can we take these home?
You absolutely may.
Wait 2 weeks.
That's right. Gotta come back and pick them up. Oh, I did not have you guys do a thing that I always say you guys do though. Just write your name on it. Every artist thinks their work, whether it's with their real name or not.
You do it at the beginning for the kids?
Always. Mm-hmm. Always the beginning so that we don't forget. It's really important.
But if you're not sure you want to claim it yet.
It's actually been really neat to, like, at this point in the game, I can sort of, if they do forget to put their names on things, I can tell whose art is whose. Because they have such distinct styles, each of them.
With the flat one, does it matter? Does it matter sort of which direction maybe you go?
Not so much. You can't really tell on this one as much as you can with the stick crayon.
So is Mr. Andrews using these crayons to teach about science that work? Because he did draw a lot of bugs over there.
They draw a lot of bugs. They actually usually use pens for the bugs, but they do these crayons for astronomy. They're really great for planets and blending colors.
That's good.
You gotta press real hard. You can do multiple passes too. That helps you.
Don't press really hard.
It actually helps, Megan, if you focus on the corner. Instead of trying to do the flat part, you work on the corner. You can pull that a little bit more in.
An edge.
Yes. Well. Oh man.
Wow. He did not use a technique for his cloak though, so
That's right.
I object.
I didn't get the chair on the reader. I didn't have room. It was huge. Oh, I see it on the little ball.
Yeah.
I didn't see that before.
And then I'm just going to lightly do the background with my black, and I'll do some brown over it to sort of give it some additional depth.
But now when the kids did it, they didn't do the dark background like we're doing, right? They did a whole different approach.
Yeah, so they actually did just a black crayon outline, and the rest of the color is all paint. So this one actually didn't follow the directions because he colored, like there's brown crayon here, and he colored a lot of it in, and I wanted them to wait so that they could do painting. It actually helps contain the paint a little bit better, and I really like the way they turned out, so. In the background, if you want to add some blue over your black and your brown as well, feel free. Mr. Antuzzi actually makes the kids wait a really long time before they're allowed to use black. This is something you have to learn how to use sparingly and carefully.
This guy looks good.
Well, I think that how we colored it, like, it's white down here, it's like it's just a
Maybe it's just mobile.
Yeah, nice. That's very good. I guess have a similar beard.
Yeah. I can't believe I just did that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so great. Will, oh wow. Look at Will. Very good. A prodigy. I think you need to be in the next grade level.
Oh. Is that third grade? What's next?
Third grade goes back down, or they do ancient, but yeah, third grade.
Did you sign it right?
And what comes in that grade? So they focus in, you kind of overview it all.
Yeah,
First
so,
and second, and then third.
but they actually do start back all the way in ancient, and so it's like ancient world.
Okay.
We still do broad, but
Does third
they
grade stay
use-
there in the ancient world?
They do.
Okay. They stay there for third grade?
Yeah,
Okay.
they stay there for third grade, and they use the story of the world text.
Okay.
Yeah. So they do lots of readings together as a group, and then they'll do projects that are in the book. So, yeah. Oh, guys. All right. I almost want to like scan all of these and keep them.